There is a narrow strip of water between Iran and Oman that most people had never heard of. It's only about 34 kilometers wide at its narrowest point, yet right now the entire world's attention is fixed on it because through this incredibly narrow passage, enormous tankers carry the lifeblood of the global economy, oil and gas from the Persian Gulf. And in 2026, Iran and the United States are locked in a fierce, high-stakes standoff over who controls what happens there. Iran says the Strait of Hormuz is closed. The United States says ships are still getting through. And every single day this dispute continues, a terrifying question gets harder to ignore. What happens if the world's most important oil passage stays closed? To understand why this tiny piece of water has become the center of global tension, you have to look at what is actually passing through it. The Persian Gulf is almost completely enclosed by land. There is only one major maritime gateway connecting it to the open ocean. That gateway is the Strait of Hormuz. Before this current conflict, roughly 20 million barrels of oil a day moved through this exact spot, around 1/5 of total global oil consumption. So when a military force threatens the Strait of Hormuz, they're not just threatening Iran's neighbors, they're threatening a supply route connected to the entire global economy. This brings us to why Iran has so much power here. The waterway sits between Iran, Oman, and the UAE, but Iran sits directly on the northern edge. For decades, Iranian military forces have built the asymmetrical ability to threaten any ship passing through. They don't need to physically occupy every meter of water. They only need to make shipping companies believe that passing through is dangerous. Because an oil tanker is an enormous investment. No company wants to send a ship carrying millions of dollars of cargo through a war zone if they don't know whether it will survive. The real power of Hormuz isn't just geography, it's fear. In 2026, the United States and Iran entered a much larger confrontation, and the Strait of Hormuz became the central battleground. Iran effectively shut down normal commercial traffic after the fighting escalated in late February. Insurance costs exploded, tankers began waiting outside the danger zone, and some companies simply decided it wasn't worth the risk. For a brief moment, there was hope. On June 17, the United States and Iran reached an interim memorandum aimed at restoring shipping. Traffic began to recover, but the agreement was a band-aid. It didn't solve the fundamental problem: who controls the strait? And that unresolved question brought the fighting right back. Before we go further, if this kind of deep geopolitical storytelling interests you, hit subscribe so you catch what's next. After the June agreement collapsed, traffic remained far below normal. By late June and July, attacks and accusations began again. Ships were attacked, Iranian forces struck Iranian targets, Iran retaliated, and Washington eventually reinstated a fierce naval blockade of Iranian ports. The Strait of Hormuz had gone from being a shipping route to a military bargaining chip, and Donald Trump has been at the center of it, repeatedly demanding that Iran allow safe passage. But Tehran insists it will not reopen Hormuz on America's terms, demanding sanctions relief and an end to military threats. Then, Trump went even further, claiming the U.S. had total control of the waterway and suggesting America might simply keep it. Iran immediately rejected the claim. It's no longer just an argument about shipping, it's an argument about absolute power. So is the strait actually closed? Depending on who you ask, the answer changes. Independent ship tracking data shows something in between. By mid-August, Reuters reported just 9 commodity vessels passed through over a 2-day period, a tiny fraction of normal traffic. Technically, ships can get through, but it's like a highway that remains open while almost nobody wants to drive on it, and that directly hits the oil market. Brent crude climbed above $93 a barrel amid these renewed fears. The world won't immediately run out of oil. Countries have strategic reserves, and some pipelines can redirect flow. The real danger isn't that there will be no oil tomorrow. The danger is how expensive does it become to keep the oil moving. This is a live battlefield. On August 14th, 2 UAE-operated oil tankers were attacked by drones right inside the strait. Once a commercial vessel is attacked just for passing through, the psychology of global shipping shatters. War risk insurance skyrockets, and those extra costs get passed down the chain, from the ship to the oil company to the refinery, and eventually to ordinary consumers around the world. So who is winning? There isn't an obvious winner. Iran has proven it can disrupt the world's most vital route, but keeping it closed damages their own interests. The U.S. has enormous military power, but even they cannot force private insurance companies to cover ships in a war zone. Everyone is trapped by the exact same geography. This tiny piece of water holds an enormous amount of power. The Americans want the waterway open. Iran wants leverage over it. Ships are caught in the crossfire, and the rest of the world is waiting. Because if the Strait of Hormuz remains restricted, the consequences will spread outward into energy markets, into global shipping, and into the daily lives of people who had never even heard of it before this year. A tiny piece of water holding an enormous amount of power. And right now, nobody knows exactly how this standoff ends. If this story gave you a new perspective, subscribe and share it. There's a lot more history like this coming.